People came to one of the guys came to a psychic fair at the temple 2 weeks ago, and he had a box. He was all taped up.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I've got money. Screw you. I got money. Okay? All right. And he said, I want somebody to tell me what's in this box.
Keep watching to learn more.
Book 3 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP. Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we'll be looking at spiritualism from an insider's point of view. My guest is Darryl Robert Schoon, who is a minister of the Church of Universality in Tucson, Arizona. He is also a financial analyst. His website is drschoon.com. He achieved quite a bit of fame for his forecast of the economic crash of 2008. He is author of Light in a Dark Place, The Prison Years. He is also author of a novel called You Can't Always Get What You Want. This is our second interview, and because the first interview with Darryl was so powerful, I would encourage viewers who haven't viewed it to view it first before this one. You'll get much more out of this one, I suspect. Welcome, Darryl. You are now a minister.
I am a minister in a spiritualist church.
Yes. And something happened to you when you got to Tucson.
That got us into this.
Yeah.
We're in Tucson. This lady tells us about a psychic that she knows, and she's known him for a long time, and a dear friend of hers that she wanted us to meet. And I just sort of blew this off because I'm really sort of, how would I describe my path? The only thing that concerns me is what apparently concerns me. All right. And I thought that was natural, but a lot concerns me. And that path has gotten very big.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stuff that I thought was irrelevant became very relevant, like psychic phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
So we go to Tucson. She tells us about this friend about hers who's a psychic. Now, the reason how Martha got really fascinated was these things called spirit cards.
Mm-hmm.
Pat Gallinet told Martha that her friend, the psychic, would have these seances or these circles where blank cards were put into an airtight, light-type box. And a half hour later, they'd open up the box and these spirit cards would come out, and some would have pictures on them.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side would be names.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she showed me these to Martha. I didn't even know about them. Yep. But Martha became fascinated, and she wanted to know.
Mm-hmm.
So Martha finds him.
Yeah.
She's fascinated with him. He's now come to Tucson for the first time, we find out, all right, through this church that we were about to go to. And I had no predilection to going to church again. To me, it was like, I have very little patience. So we go and to see this psychic. All right, we know nothing about him. And you use the word billet because in spiritualism, it's a concept where you to go to a psychic phenomena or a seance, you're given a piece of paper that the spiritualists call billets. All right, and you write down on the billet with Hoyt. You wrote down the names of people who were quote in spirit.
Hoyt is the name of the psychic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to go see Hoyt, who we have no idea of, in 2005. Or 5, and we go see him, and we don't know him at all, and Martha goes to see Hoyt first, okay? So she writes down on her card as the people told us the instructions, write down the names of people that you wish to talk to, that you wish to get advice from, like your parents if they're dead. And I said, I never asked advice from my parents when they were living. Why should I ask their advice when they're dead? Now, the lady, I know she took an attitude about my attitude, but it was what I told her. Mm-hmm. So Martha goes in first. She writes down.
So it's a one-on-one session.
Yes, but you can do it in public, but this is one-on-one.
Yeah.
So Martha writes down her names of people who are in spirit. In fact, she wrote down the name of our cat. Bruno, because she was told you could write down the names of people in spirit, human or otherwise. Mm-hmm. And our Maine Coon had just died. He was 25 pounds. We loved him. We loved Bruno. All right. Another story about that. But anyway, Martha writes down these names, and she goes and she questions. She numbered the questions, and then you sign your name on the bottom of the bill, and you fold it up. Mm-hmm. Well, Martha said in her nervousness, she folded up the piece of paper, so it was like a crumpled piece of paper.
And she's still hanging on to it.
Yeah. And then, but she gives it to Hoyt in the room because so Hoyt doesn't read it. He hangs on to it. She puts it in his hand. Well, this is what Martha said happened. Hoyt's holding onto this piece of paper and he goes, there's a Bruno here, a dog. And Martha goes, no, that's not a dog. It's a cat. He was our cat, but he was big. And Hoyt goes, you're right. He is big. That's why I thought he was a dog. But you're right. He was a cat. And then he says, there's a Cosette here, Martha's mother's name, which is an uncommon name. But then Martha said, there's a Jim here. And you wrote down James. And he wants to know why. You called him Dad, and he wanted you to call him Daddy, which was Deadeye. Deadeye, describing Martha's relationship with her father. And then Martha said her father took over Hoyt's body and had a conversation with her for the next half hour. Her father's a military guy, all right? And Hoyt sat up in the chair more stiffly and spoke using her father's vocabulary and personality to talk to her for the next half hour. And he answered Martha's 5 questions by the number. The answer to question number 1 is the answer. And that's why when Martha was walking down the hallway a half hour later, she had that look on her face. Stunned.
That's when you saw her.
Yeah, because it was my turn to walk in the room. I had no idea what she went through. So I walk in this room. We're in a townhouse in Scottsdale, Arizona. There's a chair, and there's this man sitting in the chair. And I hand him my piece of paper. I assumed that was Hoyt, the psychic. Okay? I hand him my piece of paper. And Hoyt holds onto the piece of paper, and he goes,
now you're watching him the whole time.
Yes.
So it's not as if you observed him reading your paper.
I would have. If he had taken my piece of paper, read it carefully, read it again, and looked up from the piece of paper and started talking to me, it would have been imprinted on my memory. But he did. Mm-hmm. He holds this piece of paper, just holding it, and he says, you're a teacher. And I said, no. The next thing he says, you teach. And I said, no. So I assume he's hearing, I don't know what he's going on with him, but all he's doing is saying these things. So he pauses and he said, you know things that other people don't know. And I said, everybody thinks that. I have no voice. I have no audience. I have no agreement. All right? Hoyt says, this will soon change. People will begin seeking you out. I don't know. I don't much care. It's my attitude. Mm-hmm. I got an attitude about the world. Mm-hmm. And then he says, okay, people will begin seeking you out. So I asked him a series of questions, my 5 questions, which he answered. Earth changes being one of them. All right. And then we get the end of the deal. And then that event we did a card circle where, just as our friend told us, you sit in a room with 12 people, strangers. Hoyt is there. He blindfolds himself, tapes his eyes shut, and we all have these little billets that we handed him with one question on. Hoyt sits there, there's 12 of us, and he's holding the piece of the paper, and he organizes them. Now he's blindfolded, but he starts putting them in order, like this. Okay? And then he starts calling out names. All right? Now, if he calls out names, and if you don't know them, you say nothing. But if he calls out names, and he calls out your father's name. Oh, that's my father's name. And he starts talking, oh, yes. He said, they're here for you. And he starts calling out all the names of the people who are the spirits who are here for you. And there's a ton of them, Jeffrey. I will tell you, there's a ton of them that come out. People you have written down and not written down.
And there's a dozen people
in that room.
And they've each written down five or six names. Yeah.
And he does the same with all of them. Same with all of them.
Okay.
All right. And then he answers the question that you have. And then he goes on to the next one, starts calling out other names. All right. How does he do it? We don't know. Okay. I guess he's a psychic, as he says he is, or a medium. Maybe there's some truth to this. And then at the end of this, he takes his blindfold off and he pulls the tape off his eyes. I've watched him do it innumerable times. We become quite close with Hoyt.
Because as a result of your first encounter, you became close friends.
Oh, stunned. Well, he's so booked up in Tucson that next year we couldn't see him. So we had to go to Phoenix again with Pat Gallinet, who's his old buddy, to see Hoyt. So he knew her for 15 years.
Yeah.
So we take him out to dinner and we got to know him. I asked him, how did this happen to you? So we got to know Hoyt from a different angle. The third year, Hoyt wrote the Temple of Universality, which was sponsored him in Tucson, and told them that he wanted to make sure we got private sessions with him in Tucson.
I see. Now, did we skip over the when you gave him the billet?
Okay. So I give him the billet, and he starts with me. He tells me, there's a May here. It's my mother. Then he says, there's a Hamilton. It's my father. And then he says, there's Georgia, who is a dear friend of mine who had passed away. All right, the sweetest soul on the planet.
These are all the names you had already written down.
Yeah. And then later on, there were other names that he called that I hadn't written down.
Okay.
Later on, for example, not this time, he goes to Martha and he says, there's 3 flowers. And Martha goes, 3 flowers? He says, yes, there's 3 flowers here. Tulip, violet, and myrtle. And she goes, those are Darryl's aunts. So they came in to Martha, not to me. All right? And that happened to us again. Years later, we were in New Zealand. Okay? And friends of ours that we had met in Malaysia were having their 50th wedding anniversary. And for some reason, we loved going to New Zealand. That's obvious. But for some reason, I said, we have to go again. So we went there. We go to this wedding, this 50th wedding anniversary. They have at a yacht club in Auckland. And we don't know anybody there except for the family. And people come up to us and go, oh, how kind that you are to come all this way for their wedding anniversary. And it was, I guess, kind. And I had no idea, but we knew we had to be there. And we were. Well, this is why I think we were there. At the end of the party, we called a cab to pick us up. And Martha is going to get me. And on the way to get me, at the end of this party, the wedding anniversary, Sylvie's sister, who is at the wedding anniversary, who Martha does not know, comes over and grabs Martha as she's come to get me. And Sylvie tells Martha, they're all here in public, and they never come out in public. But they're here, and they want me to give a message to you and Darryl. Later, Martha called up Sylvie, and our friend, and said her sister had done this. And she said, yes, Vanessa, her sister, is psychic. She had tried to commit suicide years before, and they sent her back, and they said, you are to give messages, not to charge, but to give message to people we want you to give messages to. So Sylvie grabs Martha on her way to tell me and says, they're all here in public. Darryl's female ancestors, like I said, this is why it reminded me of it.
Yeah.
The 3 flowers.
Mm-hmm.
Want me to tell you, they're very happy with you. They're glad that Darryl is with you. All right? Darryl is on the verge of success. Great success. But first, he must ask for help if he wants our help. Okay? From an Indian guide. He must ask for help. And she told Martha a number of other things.
Mm-hmm.
So here I'm leaving this party, having had my little nibbles and my glass of wine and, and we're going upstairs to the car. And Martha's saying, Darryl, I just talked to Vanessa. And she told, I'm listening to this. And because of our experience with Hoyt, I didn't go, oh, bullshit. I go, wow, she told you this?
Mm-hmm.
So on the way home, she's telling me the rest of what Vanessa told her. So now I go, well, if they want to help me, why don't they just help me? That's how little I knew about spirituality at the time. I have since found out that because we have free will, they watch us, but do not interject in our lives. They may see us about to go off a cliff. They don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
This is where we learn in the school of free will. And what I've learned about free will, Jeffrey, is this. Free will is a two-edged sword. And you hold on that sword, it'll cut you. And it will until you learn how to hold the sword properly. And when you learn to hold the sword of free will, it becomes a magnificent vista. It becomes a gift that never stops giving. It becomes your entryway into the portal of portals. But until then, you're going to bleed and bleed and bleed again until you learn how to handle free will properly. I sit on the edge of the bed in Auckland in around 2009, and I'm told that I asked to ask for help. And my attitude was, well, why didn't I help me anyway? But I don't know.
But this is 2009. Okay.
I'm just sort of turned on to this stuff, all right? And so
but at this point, if I understand correctly, you're already rather famous as a financial analyst.
Oh, yes. Well, you found me in 2008.
Yeah.
You emailed me and said, Darryl, I've been subscribing to Richard Russell's Dow Theory letter for years, and he has just quoted somebody named Darryl Schoon on money. Is this you? Because it spelled my name correctly, but it was so improbable that the Darryl Schoon you knew would be quoted by Richard Russell in his Dow Theory letter.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point in time, the last time I seen you, you had just gotten out of prison.
Yes! Yeah! And I was trying to get you to hustle my book.
Your novel.
My novel.
Which I enjoyed a great deal, but I had no clue that you were a well-known financial analyst.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It was not on the horizon at that time. At all.
But when you had the session with Hoyt, and he said to you, you're a teacher, and you said, well, I have no audience, and he said, that will change.
I was on the precipice of writing my paper. The reason why I wrote my paper, I was a part of Marshall Thurber's Positive Deviant Network, and he introduced me to this guy whose provenance, financial provenance, was beyond.
Yep.
And he's so low key. He's not. This guy, by the time I met him, had already lectured at the Federal Reserve on debt, had been retained by the big Wall Street banks, and had run a multi-billion-dollar proprietary hedge fund for Credit Lyonnais in Paris that he had put up for them, and had made outside returns, and was in the Bond Trader magazine Hall of Fame for all-time bond traders. And Marshall says, Darryl, John is worried about the markets like you are. Well, I knew he made me worried about the markets, and I didn't care a hoot about who he was, but I knew I was far more worried about him because I had heard those words about the time of the vulture in 1991 and was reading about this stuff and understood it like few others did.
People who have watched our previous interview will know about this download that came to you when you were in prison. About the financial collapse.
Yes, 1991.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I met Hoyt, I knew this like the back of my hand.
So we're jumping ahead 5 years from your time with
I'm now
Hoyt.
a minister at the Temple of Universality, which sponsored Hoyt.
Mm-hmm.
Through them, I found out about spiritualism. I found out about its heritage. I found out about where it came from. I found out really the headwaters that Richard Ireland said was of spirituality was somebody you introduced me to. In 1972, when I was living in Hip House with you, and Dr. Wilson Van Dusen had come and given a lecture on Swedenborg.
That's right.
And Richard Ireland, in his book on mediumship, had attributed spiritualism to Swedenborg's first appearance in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And talked about phenomena.
That's a good attribution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I met Wilson Van Dusen through you.
Yeah.
And being the acid hippie that I was, what I knew of Dr. Van Dusen was that rumor had it, that Wilson Van Dusen, as head of the Mendocino State Mental Hospital, had taken acid and walked out on the wards of the institution that he ran. Now, most people didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it either, but I had heard it
mm-hmm.
because I was an acid hippie.
Yeah.
And we were absolutely attuned to what LSD did or didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And that's what I had heard about Wilson. So you had introduced me to a person years before who introduced me to spiritualism. I had no context of it.
Yeah.
I hadn't even heard of Swedenborg, who he was. And when I read about Swedenborg, I realized what he talked about was exactly what you were into. Phenomena, psychic prediction, all this world that I was just dumped into in the year 2005 and later.
I'll just mention parenthetically for viewers who are not familiar with Swedenborg.
Yes.
On this channel, there's another video with Gary Lockman going into great detail about Swedenborg's life and work. I'm linking to it now in the upper right-hand corner of your screen if you want to check out that video.
Okay. Now, for example, I'm in this church.
Yeah.
This spiritualist church that sponsored Hoyt Robinette.
Yeah.
That I didn't want to be into.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I went to this church only to sign up for Hoyt one day because they were sponsoring it. And I found out that they weren't having sign-ups and I wanted to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And Martha goes to me, just like she did with a phone call. Darryl, it's impolite if we leave now. Which it would have been.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been. You go into a church, you can't sign up, and you leave before the service starts. What happens during that church thing is Betty Tadaleski, at one of these times, gives
the founder
mm-hmm. gives a message to Martha. And she says, Wendy, I know that's not your name, but you're like Wendy in Peter Pan. And you've been in some mighty high places, and you're supposed to tell us about them. So Martha and I go home and go, what does this mean? And we thought, well, we should at least have a conversation with Betty Tadaleski.
Mm-hmm.
So we invite her to breakfast. We meet at the Tucson Racket and Tennis Club. This lady is sitting across from me, this very attractive blonde lady, sitting across from us very quietly. And I sit down and I look at her and these words come out of my mouth. Who are you and what are you doing? I never intended to say those words. They came out of my mouth and she told us a story about her spiritualism, Temple of Universality, Camp Chesterfield, and this whole world that she exhibited, that she basically lived in when she fell into what she called Wonderland. That had gone back for 25 years, taking people from Tucson to Camp Chesterfield, the spiritualist community, to see Bill English, Bob Ireland, Clifford Bias, the people, all these people who've been back there who did phenomena right and left, who materialized things, who just did this stuff on call, and she'd done it for 25 years until they banned spiritualism and not spiritual phenomena on the campus. And so Hoyt was now coming to Tucson, where we met him for the first time.
In other words, Camp Chesterfield, a well-known spiritualist camp, Hoyt Robinette, Hoyt Robinette, the medium who you had become friendly with, had been affiliated there.
Yes, and he lives there.
He produces phenomena. And in fact, show the picture, the card, or I'll show it electronically on the screen. This is a drawing that was produced on the billet.
Yes,
it was inside of a.
Not on the billet. The billet, we wrote our little things down. Yeah. But what happens is in these groups, he'll show us a stack of index cards, like from Walmart. Yeah. Index cards. Okay. They're blank on both sides. And then he'll have somebody who never experienced this before, never been there at a card circle, open it up and make sure there's nothing on either side. Yeah. Then he shows us this empty basket with all these pens and gel pens and writing pens with caps on them. And he says, I've gone through all of these to make sure there's ink in them, and I put the cap back on them. Then, when the person has told us that there's nothing on either side of these cards, he dumps them back in this basket. And he puts the lid back on, and then he blindfolds himself, and he starts reading the billets that we all written and given to him, and he answers our question. After our questions are answered, after a half hour, he opens up the basket, and there's all these cards in it with a picture on them and the names on the back. Now, this one is of particular significance to me. Because this was also probably around 2009 or somewhere around there. And we're in the card circle, and we had 2 weeks before, 10 days before, gone to our first, 3 weeks before, gone to our first Bruno Gröning circle. I don't know if you are familiar with Bruno Gröning.
We've talked about Bruno Gröning, yes.
Bruno's last name is spelled Groening. He was a healer. He was in Germany at the end of World War II. There were articles on him in Der Spiegel, which is like their Life magazine. He was famous. He had come, and thousands of people would go here and be healed, like Jesus. Never charged money. Well, the doctors got really uptight, and they got the civil authorities to ban these meetings. He never charged money. And they arrested him eventually for practicing medicine without a license. And Bruno said, if I'm not allowed to do this, I will burn up. And he died 4 years later, burned up on the inside. The doctors opened him up, and that's what it was. Well, I knew nothing about this, because you don't know anything about it until you know about it. All right. But things happened to me really abruptly. We're going to a meditation thing, and we're chanting Indian chants and stuff like that. It was our little particular group. And they were going back to India, and our friends who we had met through them said, there's a meeting on Wednesday that if you want to come. Well, we went. And we were not looking for another phenomenon. We're not looking for another group. We're not looking for another damn thing. And we go there, and there's this video on Bruno Gröning, his circle, that meditating with your hands up. The light comes in. Yeah, maybe not. All right. And then we leave, and all this feedback we heard from other people of stuff that was happening. Wow, to them. All right. So we go back to the next meeting. They have them every 3 weeks. And it's Marlies and Gert from Germany. They're Germans, because Bruno was German. So this whole thing
is a group that's meeting in Tucson.
Yes. And they're all over the world now. Yeah. There are Bruno circles all over the world. We know shit about this guy. So we come back, and there's Gert and Marlies. I go, are you guys into psychics? And Marlies goes, yeah. I said, well, one of the best psychics in the planet is going to be here tomorrow, because the church sponsored Hoyt. He doesn't come anymore. But that time he was coming maybe once, sometimes even twice a year to Tucson. He booked up to the gilt because everybody knew about him in Tucson. He's coming next year, tomorrow. And Marlies goes, well, that's our 45th anniversary. We probably won't be there. Well, they show up. There's over 100 people in the thing. We've all written our little billets. They put it in the basket. Hoyt gets up there, blindfolds himself. We sing a song, and Hoyt starts going through and calling out names. This is whole rigmarole. Answers the question, goes on to the next one, the next one. Well, he starts calling out names, and they're German, and Marlies goes, that's me. It's me. Names that she recognized.
These are the friends you met at the Bruno gathering.
Yeah, Barley's and Gert.
Okay.
So he calls, and she's written a billet. Mm-hmm. So he calls out names that she recognizes.
Yeah.
And she goes, that's me. Yeah. That's my aunt, my blah, blah, blah. And he goes, yes. And he answers her question, and then he says, there's a Bruno here for a number of you. And a bunch of us have been at the Bruno circle of friends. And there we are. This is Bruno's first appearance at the Temple of Universality. The next week, we're having a card circle. Okay? Mm-hmm. There's around 12 of us in the circle. Hoyt's doing it, and he leans down and he tells me, this is before the circle, before we put the things in the basket, before we have our billets filled out. And he said, Bruno says he's going to put his picture on your card. Mm. Okay? Goes around, comes out. This is the picture I just showed. And it's not the picture of Bruno that they knew in Germany. Yeah. It's like more of a mystical turban entity. Mm-hmm. But of
course, Bruno, in fact, is long dead.
Is long dead.
Yeah.
Okay. So I get this picture on my card, and his name is signed on the back of my card, along with my mother, father, and other people I know. Signed. Okay. Wow. Mm-hmm. All right. A couple months later, Martha and I are in a trance circle at the temple. We have a temple medium. I call her, I just made up this name for her. She's the temple phone booth. Okay. Where you can talk to your relatives and stuff. Mm-hmm. She's been into this shit for a long time. And we're in this seance, dark room. We meditate in this room. Okay. I mean, for example, let me tell you who these people are. You are aware of the Alice A. Bailey series of books.
Oh, yes. Well known.
Well known. Mm-hmm. I ran into these books in 1967 in the Haight-Ashbury. Mm-hmm. And I'm dead on hot on the path of metaphysical truth. Mm-hmm. And I find out the thing that cracked it was astrology. Wow. How could they know that? Well, if they know that, that meant, and the acid I took, that this reality was not the way I thought it was. Mm-hmm. So I started reading. And one of the books I ran across very early on was the Alice A. Bailey series of channel books. Mm-hmm. Brilliant books. They were so intense, I couldn't read them. And Jeffrey, I can read almost anything.
But these are very dense, difficult books.
Difficult books about subjects, esoteric healing, the return of the brotherhood. I mean, 20 books got channeled. Yeah. All incredibly complex. Yeah. Which I had put aside because I couldn't read them. Yeah. But when I'd see them in people's houses, you know what thought came across my mind? These people are serious. Mm-hmm. That's all I thought. These people are serious. Yeah. So we run to the Temple of Universality, and 3 women are basically at the head of it. Betty, who got the vision, told us she was going to start a church. Mm. Christine Facchetti, who was the medium, and Reverend Inga Mason, one of the original Pan Am stewardesses. Okay? Mm-hmm. Pan Am stewardess. She ends up in Tucson, introduced to metaphysics, and she takes to the Blue Books and Alice A. Bailey series books like a duck to water. Mm. She has read every one of those books at least once. She's got them annotated. She's got them referenced. I mean, these are books I couldn't read. Yeah. I couldn't. And so we would start meeting at one of the things at Inga Mason's house, and we'd close our eyes, and she'd read to us out loud. Mm. She's got a beautiful voice. Mm. And she says, you're getting this through osmosis, which is the best I could get, because they're not less dense now than they were 50 years and 40 years ago. I ran into them.
Extremely abstract.
Extremely abstract.
Yeah.
Okay. So there we are in this room where Inga has these trance circles. All light, because that's where Hoyt does his readings. We're sitting there. Okay. We talk. Spirits are coming in. And we go in a circle. It's now my turn. This booming voice comes in and addresses me. I'm shocked. She's usually as Christine, the joy guides, and your mother's here, like that. And we're into this stuff. Mm-hmm. This happens like going to the Nationals game and, wow, they beat the Astros. Woo! We do trance circles like this in Tucson. Mm-hmm. It's like part of the deal. Yep. It's like, you actually know one of the best. Oh, yeah, he's friends with. This is us. Mm-hmm. This is our life in Tucson. Mm-hmm. This booming voice. And I go, who are you? And the voice goes, I am Bruno. And Martha and I go, oh, Bruno, our cat. Yeah, we thought it was our cat. Because we have this cat named Bruno. Right. And and it was. And he starts to laugh. I am not the cat. All right. It was Bruno Gröning. Yeah. And we have a very close relationship with Bruno. Very close. We talked, when Martha's cell phone went out one day, he told her, you're going to need a cell phone. You're going to need a cell phone. That's how Martha's relationship with Bruno is. All right. And because Martha's very psychic.
Okay.
I'm sort of psychic. But all of us are plugged in at some level. But Bruno we've seen healings that he's done, and he's become like.
In other words, he's still doing healings.
Oh, on the other side.
Uh-huh.
That's why the Bruno circles get together.
They can no longer arrest him.
No. Very good, Jeffrey. He's beyond the pale of the law. Uh-huh. The statute of limitations is run on Bruno. But he has really Bruno calls himself a friend. We've got his pictures all over our house.
So you've had many sessions now.
Oh, many relationships. Our relationship with him is like me and you. It really is. It's that close with a disembodied spirit. 1959. And I said, ask Bruno. That's who we go to when these situations are beyond.
So, but is it always the same medium?
No.
Different mediums?
Not even you can ask yourself. When Martha talks to Bruno, it's through her.
Oh.
When he told her cell phone was going out, it was like in our morning meditation.
I see.
She heard that. We were with Pat Aiken, this friend of ours who's an artist. That's the other person, the person who introduced us to Hoyt, introduced Pat Aiken, incredible artist in Tucson. She channeled Bruno for a while. All right. And Bruno came to her and he said, if saints were born, there would be no reason for the life of Bruno. And that's why he talked about his suffering. Talked about the purpose of suffering. All right. And he said, if my teachings can even be called teachings, this is what they are. Ask and wait. Now, we all ask. None of us wait. As soon as that asking is done, we do it again. We keep hitting that button like you're doing the elevator when it's not there. All right? It's the faith in the waiting. It's the expectation. And that's what Bruno told people. That if you don't believe, you're not going to get nothing. People came to one of the guys came to a psychic fair at the temple 2 weeks ago, and he had a box. He was all taped up. He said, I've got money. Screw you. I got money. Okay? All right. And he said, I want somebody to tell me what's in this box. Martha said, that's not how we operate. These messages are a gift of love. And if you want to give money for that gift, you can. But we're not here to be tested by you. We're not here to make you believe in us. We believe it. So she said, but I'll see somebody if somebody wants to deal with you, basically. She found something. I can do it. And he was right. She said what was in the box. But that's how it is. We're not there to be tested. I don't care if anyone believes that Jesus turned water into wine. I don't care if anybody believes this phenomenon can be done. I'm like that guy who pulled a manhole cover into my head. I don't care if people believe what I have believed stuff that's for so long that nobody believes. I don't care if you're for the war in Vietnam. You're not going to convince me. And I'm not going to convince you that the war is an unjust war. But I'm not going to convince you because nobody could convince me that psychic phenomena was true until I saw it. And I believe when the time comes, you will believe. And you will only believe when you're open to believing it. And your unwillingness, keep your unwillingness. Keep your skepticism. Keep your hard-ass ways. And life is going to be hard until you open up. Keep your judgments. Keep your perceptions. Don't give in. Don't give it up. Be an asshole. Fine. Now, I know this is not the spiritual thing to say. That you're supposed to look at it with, as Philo said, everyone is fighting a great battle. Have compassion. And I do, when I remember that. Everyone is fighting a great battle.
Yeah.
But when we're not fighting, when I'm not into that, and some guy comes up with the skepticism, my gut reaction is, I don't care. I'm not here to convince you. I'm not here to tell anybody that life is a certain way. I'm not here to tell anybody that the reality that you believe in, experience, and believe is true is not true. Because for you it is. And until it changes, it isn't. So, our relationship with Hoyt is very different. Our relationship with spiritualism is very different. And I think the fact that we're open to it shows the incredible gifts that is given to us.
At some point, you made a decision to become a minister.
Oh, no. No. Yeah, no, you're right. I had to. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a minister.
Uh-huh.
How it happened to us was this. First of all, they asked us to we came there, and then they put us on the board, and we're there. So we're members of the church. We're going every week. We're members of this church.
Sure.
And one day, we're in a trance circle again. Those dark things. We have our medium, Christine Fassetti. And it was about, things came up, and Martha gets her message after me. And Martha's message is from her mother. And her mother goes, "Isn't that wonderful? My little girl is going to become a minister." That was the first we heard of it. Isn't that wonderful? My little girl is going to be a minister.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even say anything about that. That's one of those things that you can put blank cards in a box and pictures will come out on it. All right? The next day, we're about to go to Argentina for Hoyt's wedding. Okay, we're about to go to Argentina. Dear friends of ours, the ones who introduced us to Bruno, at our house at 9 a.m, which nobody comes to our house at 9 a.m, but they knew we were going to Argentina. They wanted gifts to give to their friends in Argentina. So they're there, coincidentally.
Mm-hmm.
The four of us are sitting there. The phone rings. It's Betty, the minister, Reverend Tadaleski, the one who started the temple. She says, "I'm going to come by in 10 minutes. I'm going to ordain you. I have mantles." I said, "Oh, well, you can say, no. If I sit down, I'm going to stay. I have to keep moving. I have things to do." I go back and I tell Walter and Julie, "Betty's coming over." Because we were going we run the same circles. I open up, there's Betty. She's got 2 mantles, the things you have over her arms. She comes in, we're in the circle of the anteroom. She puts one on Martha, puts one on me. We hold hands. She ordains us, and she's gone. Gone. And she said Spirit told her the night before to ordain us. That we already wore mantles on the other side. That's how we became ministers at the Temple of Universality. It shocked the people at the temple that we were now ministers. Where did they come from? How did this happen? So when you asked me, so at a certain point,
it's not as if you made a decision.
I just did the same thing about going to jail. It was apparent to my friends that when I got busted, that I was the only one surprised. Everybody knew me. You end up in the can. It was no more a choice for me to go to prison than it was for me to be a minister. I had desires not to be in a church. I don't like sin. There's no way I try. There's my time. But that's how I became a minister of that specific church. That extraordinary church that was into all the stuff that you've been into for years. Because nobody's into spiritualism anymore. Even the people in psychic phenomena. Spiritualism is such a little narrow thing.
Yes, I can tell you in general amongst parapsychologists, spiritualism has a low reputation.
Well, so does drug dealing, Jeffrey Mishlove, and I've been both. So, I know, and I don't care if people don't think much of spiritualism, phenomena, the war in Vietnam, drug dealing, life or stuff. I really don't care.
I hope you understand. I'm not putting
I know you don't. I'm just bringing that about that. I know who you are, and I have great love in my heart for you. We wouldn't be here together unless somehow dharmically you were not supposed to walk into that restaurant in 1971 and order Chinese food.
Well, Darryl, this is so wonderful to be with you, one of my oldest friends.
Oh, man. Life is good, Jeffrey. Life is good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Namaste. Om Mani Padme Hum.
Thank you, Darryl, for coming to Albuquerque and being with me. And thank you for being with us.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.